Hello everyone and welcome back. So starting in this video, we're going to be working on some new systems utilizing some new concepts. Now we're going to kick things off by first discussing some of these systems and how they work together. Things such as the TerrainManager, the PatchBuilder, and the PatchDispatch. After Lee gives an explanation of how these systems are going to work together with one another, we're going to move into the implementation of the PatchDispatch, right, Lee?
Right.
Okay.
So basically, what these systems are doing is, when you boil it down, their whole purpose in life is deciding what patches get built when and in what order, or whether or not that patch gets built at all. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in the demonstrations that you saw earlier when we were playing around with the terrain viewer and the terrain editor, that you saw when I swung the camera around, patches that weren't there came into view and they were being loaded, and only when the camera was looking at them. Well, the system's a little bit more complicated than just turning off the visibility of the patches that are seen by the camera. There is some sorting and some prioritizing that is happening behind the scenes. Basically, the TerrainManager is looking at the position of the character, and then it decides based on some variables, those being the visible distance and the interest, or the visible range and the interest range of the TerrainManager. It will determine how many patches are going to be in an array of X by Z surrounding the character. So basically, just like when we hit now, or hit play now, inside of this, give it a sec to fire off, we see an array of 3 by 3. Of course, the third one is hidden at this point in time, but we see patches being created in this grid. Well, the TerrainManager is going to do the same thing. It's going to say, hey, the player is standing where the camera is, and in this case, let's say I had a interest area of 3. So it's going to say, basically, I need to look in a area of 1/2 of this. So it'd be 1.5, and it would round it to 1. So it would look in one unit direction, or one patch in every direction from the camera, and queue up this patch to be created. Now it's going to do some logic, basically go, hey, is there a patch there already? Is there not? Then it's going to make the determination of whether or not it needs to add this patch. It's also going to look at the direction that the camera is looking, and then only queue up those patches that are in that direction. Now, the patch builder is a queue that's going to keep track of all these patches that need to be built. The TerrainManager goes, hey, I need these built, and tells the patch builder. Patch builder goes, oh, okay, so you need these ones. Well, I can't get to them all right now, so I'm going to put them in this queue, and as I can get time to get to them, I'm going to build those. Now, because this takes a finite amount of time, there is the possibility that the player decides to look somewhere else or go somewhere else before these patches have been created. With the systems that we had in the past, one of the problems that would come up from doing this is, even though the player has changed direction and started running off in this direction, the patches that were in front of the player would not be created until the patches in the queue that are behind the player have already been created. This is a waste of performance, and you will find it greatly limits the speed at which you can travel, because the faster you're moving and the more you move around, those patches are going to accumulate in the queue, and it's going to take longer and longer for the patches in front of you to appear. So what the patch builder is going to do, in addition to just doing the patch building, it's going to do some verification to make sure that the patch that it's built is still valid for being built, meaning that it is still within the desired range of the player, and that the camera can still see or is looking in that direction. It will also sort the order in which the patches are created, because it makes more sense to create the patches that are closest to the camera or the player than it is creating a patch that may be way off in the distance. So what it's going to do is it's going to take that queue and sort them so that the patches closest to the player will be created first, with each patch further from the camera given lower priority in the construction queue. So that is what our patch builder does for us. Now, the way this works is similar to the way we did with the Unity dispatcher, or the Unity dispatcher and the Unity dispatch, when we were looking at the threading stuff in session 8 of the R&D. So the patch builder is a modified version of the Unity dispatcher. The difference being that we're going to use a list as opposed to a priority queue, because with a queue we can only check out the next item. Well, we want to use a list because we're going to be sorting this list and possibly removing items at a random position in that list. So we're going to make a new class called a patch builder that is going to basically be a copy of the Unity dispatcher with slightly different functionality.
The patch builder or patch dispatch?
No, Patch Builder.
Oh, okay.
is a reworked version of the Unity dispatcher.
Okay.
Now, I still want to have priority, and by removing the priority queue from the Patch Builder and replacing it with a list, I'm going to have to modify the dispatches that we use in the Patch Builder to contain the priority information. So the Patch Dispatch is a reworked version of the Unity dispatch to include the priority information as well as the terrain patch that we're going to be working on.
Okay.
Because basically, yeah, some of this you haven't seen yet because you weren't here for session 8.
Right.
But basically, just to recap, the Unity dispatcher is a way of executing actions or functionality at a given point in time from the main thread. We use this to execute anything in the Unity API that may be queued up from another thread.
Okay.
So with that in mind, and the functionality is very similar for what we're doing with patches, which is why I've built a new version of it. Now, the way this works is we queue up jobs. Those jobs are Unity dispatches. That's actually the little wrapper around the functionality. It's also what keeps track of whether or not that job has been completed or not, and gives the functionality to allow the thread to wait for that action to be completed, or it can just continue on.
Okay.
So that is our little message, or our little message dispatch. Well, for our patch dispatch, we're going to need a custom version of that holds more information than what a Unity dispatch is capable of. That additional information that it's going to hold is going to be the priority and the terrain patch itself, because we're going to need information from the terrain patch, specifically its position in space, so we can do the distance checks and its positional or its relation to the camera, whether or not it's in front of the camera or off to the side or behind the camera. And we're going to use that information to determine whether or not the patch is going to continue to be drawn, or if it's going to be removed from the queue, or whether or not it will still stay there, but then it will order at which point in time it will be drawn. If it's going to be the very next patch that's drawn, or if it's going to be the 50th patch that's going to be drawn.
Okay.
So, and with that, that's pretty much the intro. I think we can probably wrap it up here, and then what we'll do in the next video is we'll implement the patch dispatch.
Okay.
So we'll have that message, and we'll go from there, and when that's done, we'll build the patch builder.
Okay, are these pretty much like one-shot videos to put together, the patch dispatch, patch builder?
Yes, both of them are. They're about 50, 75 lines of code in length each, but it's not that big of a deal because we're going to be copying the code from our Unity dispatch and our Unity dispatcher, and then just modifying that as needed for this one-off case.
Okay.
So a lot of it's just going to be copy and paste and adding a little bit of functionality.
Gotcha. Very cool. Okay, well, with that, then, that's going to wrap up this video, and we will see you guys in the next. Thanks a lot.